Meghna, welcome Nithin, and welcome Panagiotis. How are you doing? I hope it's all
Doing
good.
well, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're doing good. Thank you.
Perfect. So, given that I think we are about 40 odd minutes and there could be some Q&A towards the end with participants, I think let's dwell directly into the topic what we have. And just for the introduction, I know all of you represent basically different domains, but maybe probably let me take opportunity to have 10 to 15 seconds from each one of you to basically talk about the sector or the segment of the fintech you represent and the company you are representing, so that audience also understands a bit more context about when you are talking about a particular space in the fintech as far as infrastructure is concerned. So let me request Meghna. Meghna, would you like to take 10-15 seconds to just quickly talk about your background and the area which you focus on?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Meghna Suryakumar, the founder and CEO of CrediWatch. CrediWatch is an AI-based platform that curates disparate digital footprints across the digital world of businesses, irrespective of their shape and size. When we curate these digital footprints, we convert that into actionable risk and credit intelligence, and we work with leading financial institutions to help them solve for the credit lending gap that is there for 60 million SMEs in India. In terms of the sector that I represent, obviously I represent the fintech sector and specifically the credit sector. If you look at the Indian landscape, there we have about 1.5 million companies and 60 million small businesses. The last 5 years has seen a lot of disruption in terms of different business models that have been evolving, whether they're neobanks or platforms or marketplaces or NBFCs, balance sheet based lending, flow based lending, banks trying to acquire technology to get neo-banking capabilities. So we've seen a lot of disruption in the industry. And I'm here today to talk about the different trends and the different disruptions that are happening in the finance sector to tackle this opportunity of being able to lend to underbanked and unbanked people and businesses. Thank you.
Welcome to you as well. And a few seconds from you as you are joining from different time zone and looking at the global market as well. So would you like to talk about few seconds about your company, your focus, and area of basically segment which you are looking for?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a very interesting discussion. So my name is Panagiotis, Kriaris, as you mentioned. I have a background in banking and payments for many years in fintech. I'm now in charge of business development for Unzer. So as I said, I think it's as you said, it's I'm going to be providing the European perspective. I have a focus on the payments space, I would say. I think there are many things happening on the payment space. So it would be interesting to understand how this is also influencing the fintech trends that you have been mentioning. So looking forward to a very fruitful discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Panagiotis. And Nithin, you have been very well-known name in the wealth management space and doing a lot of work with SEBI and otherwise with global clients as well. So Nithin, bit of details about your company and your focus area.
Yeah, so I'm Nitin Vyakaranam. I'm the founder and CEO of Artha Yantra. We provide financial wellness for retail customers. Our customer base largely today is India. However, we work with large corporates who are our customers. We give employee financial wellness as a benefit. We also work with a lot of financial institutions in India and globally, where we largely try to integrate global financial infrastructure with our own proprietary quant to help them deliver financial wellness for their customers in their local countries. That's about us.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think with this, we'll go into we'll probably start in the same sequence. So Meghna, I'll come to you first. And as the topic is pretty interesting, and just to add here, I see, Meghna, you are representing the underserved or unserved segment of access to finance, credit, basically, and looking at the Atmanirbhar Bharat or the self-reliant Bharat or the India, or even globally also, you see the MSMEs have been phenomenally impacted by pandemic. And I think access to finance has become a big agenda for all the governments, including Indian government. And we have seen a lot of schemes coming out there, right? So I think very relevant that you are there on the panel and you'll be able to add quite a bit of value in that. Again, and Nithin talking about wealth management, financial wellness, I think very interesting area because as savings are moving towards various other asset classes and the goal-based investing happening a lot, and corporate employees are also looking at financial wellness as a holistic approach, I think it would be good. And Panagiotis, you are talking about payment infrastructure and the global transactions infrastructure. I think that would be good. So I think we couldn't have had a better panel than this, that we are representing all the almost like big three pillars of the financial services industry or the banking industry. So Meghna, coming to you, just for audience perspective, first question probably all of all the panelists I will request to answer is that when we talk about fintechs playing a innovative role in the financial infrastructure and how they can benefit the banking and the financial services, what do you see as various pillars of financial infrastructure, and what does it mean? What do all we basically count on the financial infrastructure components, and then we'll go delve further into the basically how they are playing a role and what kind of role they can play. But Meghna, your thoughts on that what all something which can constitute the financial infrastructure piece where the fintechs can play a significant role, and they are working innovatively already, or they have a potential to develop it as we go forward. Yeah.
Sure. I think the first pillar was obviously digitizing payments and going cashless. And with the UPI, which was the first step in building, financial infrastructure, the fact that the India Stack and then the UPI and the work done by the National Payments Council, payments and cashless payments, going digital on payments becomes the first step towards inclusiveness, because it's not just large companies doing wiring money and doing cashless transactions, but now it's gone into the hands of the common man, where anyone can do a cashless transaction, and that's the first step for financial inclusion. That also goes into the fact that because of the Aadhaar, Aadhaar was another big step in terms of financial inclusion towards individuals, because after the Aadhaar, I think close to 80% of people in India have a bank account today. And there's especially during the pandemic and on many of the government subsidies, you had a very easy and seamless way to make this benefit directly reach the bank account of the end user. And in fact, it's a lot of studies say that the main beneficiaries of the Aadhaar initiative, where people have opened bank accounts, have actually been women, and close to 40-50% of women in the country. That is an increase that we saw in terms of having a bank account. And the fact that these subsidies reached on time, I think that we've at 5% of the people have gone up above the poverty line. So getting bank accounts and getting payment digital infrastructure was the first step, and the next step was to be able to create a digital lending journey to make finance accessible, right? So after the India Stack, we have initiatives like the DigiLocker, and then we have the fintechs who built key infrastructure in terms of giving APIs as a service to be able to get data to lend, be able to give KYC infrastructure, to be able to get data for credit files. So the whole banking API as an infrastructure that we've seen in the past 5 years has been another important key development that we see. And KYC itself has evolved to be able to do video KYC today, which is kind of one of the innovations that we have in India, to be able to do video KYC even now for complex situations, right? So to be able to do video KYC, to be able to do KYC digitally, that has been a very important development. And the other infrastructure that's developing is in terms of the kind of, the GST, right? When the GST has come in and all of this, let's say that the trade has become almost seamless, like flow-based, right? With the GST coming in, 12 million businesses have been brought into the digital economy. And we have now alternative data to be able to, look at them and create a score that is more meaningful to give them access. So the fact that we've brought in a lot of initiatives and policies like GST and built an infrastructure around it, where just with a simple consent, you would be able to electronically get somebody's GST data just with an SMS. So building that kind of an infrastructure, of course, is going to lead to a lot of inclusiveness in terms of lending. And then then now we have the new infrastructure coming in with open credit, enablement initiative, right? The AA framework, where you create the data fiduciary who's able to ensure that the data that leaves the borrower's phone or system or laptop and enters into the bank's infrastructure is protected and is dealt with in the appropriate manner. So building the framework for what we have as a GDPR globally, even before the privacy bills have come into place. So building in that kind of an infrastructure with the AA framework to protect data and data, to have data governance, and also then looking at all the different open APIs and banking APIs that we are really geared to do flow-based lending, to be able to lend in real time. So these are some of the very, very important initiatives that have happened. And of course, using AI ML and building the core infrastructure for that, where there's digitization, right? Right, with the Kirana stores, with companies like Khata Book and OK Credit. So there are various fintechs that have helped digitize and bring in small businesses into the digital economy by giving them infrastructure to be able to get themselves online and for the data to become valuable. So the different initiatives of bringing in SMEs into the digital economy actually is going to be the key driver, because you have a lot of alternative data sets which can actually enable us to provide the right kind of interest, the right kind of product and financial services to these businesses.
Great, Meghna. I think you wonderfully covered actually all the journey which we have had in last 5 years, and I think that has made India probably among the top few players in the world to have the end-to-end adoption of digital in customer onboarding, underwriting, access to finance, collections, etc. So that's very wonderfully covered. And actually, I think I did not know that all of that can be counted as if infrastructure created by the fintechs. But I think it makes a lot of sense what you said, and very good insight for our all the audience and people who are listening to this, that practically each of these building blocks actually has created an infrastructure for, or a highway for basically providing the access to finance to people or credit flow, etc. So that's pretty interesting thoughts. So Nithin, coming to you, I think from wealth management perspective, do you also see that some of these building blocks have been coming up in there? And obviously all of us know that what Meghna talked about from regulatory point of view, it's more of a central bank or Reserve Bank of India's prerogative, whereas what Nithin, you focus on is more on the investment side of it or wealth management side of it. So that's basically another regulator. We have SEBI. And so just want to hear from you that what kind of infrastructure you see in fintech space is being created in India as well as other countries where you operate in, and how that's been evolving.
Yeah, I think globally that's something that's moving. The same things or similar things are happening globally, largely around three areas. From an infrastructure perspective, one is data, second is analytics, and third is transaction disintermediation. If you look at data, largely data infrastructure has been around, whether it's in India, NBFC AA account aggregation, or in Europe, it's PSD2. Similarly, Singapore, South Korea, all these countries have really come up with their own consent-based data aggregation models. This is obviously in addition to what all we have done in India, whether it's our KYC infrastructure, Artha-based KYC infrastructure, or video KYC infrastructure. But if you really look at all these, and you can club all of them into just one bucket and say it's all data on customer, whether it's verifying customer, whether it's AML driven, or just account opening, all those things really form the core fundamental foundational infrastructure for really various services that can be provided in the whole banking and financial services industry globally, not just India. So that's data. Second is analytics, where that data can be used to really, whether what Meghna was talking about in terms of credit analytics. We in fact use all the data to create holistic advisory. We go through almost 1 trillion options real time, look at over 1,000 data points per customer to be able to give hyper personalized recommendations, right? So the analytics on top of that base data is where a lot of new work is happening. And then the third one is the whole transaction disintermediation segment, where you have the services being really exposed to the customer. And here you have the whole blockchain world, smart contracts world. In fact, UPI's services also would come under the whole transfer disintermediation models in payment. So we really look at it as a stack where each there's a lot happening in each level of the stack. There are different companies which have been building up softwares and algos for each stack. But the beauty is that all of them will work together and then be able to generate services, because the core of all these things is one. The key enabler here is the customer. It's time that the industry puts the customer at the center of the universe. The product will move out and the customer has to come to the center of the universe. And all these together will really enable that.
Excellent, Nithin. Excellent. So that's a pretty interesting point of view. So Panagiotis, what do you see, especially in Europe, what Nithin talked about, taking it further, and do you see applicability in India as well, or especially in the payment infrastructure space or any other space where you are operating? How do you see fintechs creating a lot more, playing the role, not just for onboarding of users, providing them customer experience, but playing a significant role in the infrastructure, which can be basically becoming the backbone of the whole financial services ecosystem?
Yes. So thank you, Sachin. I think all the points that were mentioned before are very relevant. I would like to start from a different perspective, because for me, if you see what was happening, the setup that we used to have in financial services a few years ago, you would see, or many years ago, you would see that everything, let's say the traditional financial institutions were based on a very specific monolithic setup that was kind of bounded by national boundaries. So there was no international perspective. Now, I think what is happening in terms of infrastructure, and which is quite revolutionizing the space and revolutionizing financial services, is that you have digital platforms, for example, which are built from day one to serve international customers across borders, across segments, and with a technology that is modular. So for me, this is changing everything in terms of infrastructure, because you're going from a vertical monolithic application to something which is very agile, which is very flexible, and which is, as I said before, is very modular. So now you have the APIization of the economy, meaning that you have bundles of applications, you have a tech stack which is very easy, and this is due to a large part due to fintechs. So basically now what you can do is that you, in a very short period of time, you can build modular applications. You can choose whatever stacks you think are relevant. So for example, you can choose a payment stack, you can choose a lending stack, you can choose, for example, onboarding, or you can also take KYC out of the box. And what we see today is that we have fintechs and other organizations building kinds of services that in the past they used to take at least a couple of years just to go up to the level of existing players. So now you can actually build this kind of services in a relatively sooner period of time. So for me, this is making a tremendous difference in terms of infrastructure. The second thing that I think is key and is crucial, and I think there is no differentiation between India or the rest of the world, I think this is a global trend that I see, is that in the past we have seen that organizations, financial organizations, were built and they had a focus to onboard customers. I mean, this was the basic thing that they would have as a goal. Now, I think in terms of fintech and in terms of what's happening today, on top of what I mentioned before, I think we see a double kind of, let's say, focus. On the one hand side, you see the customers, of course, it's a very big priority. But on the other hand side, I think you have a new breed of customers, and they are called developers. And actually, this is making a big difference, because now the developers are the ones that are taking your APIs. You are publishing your APIs, and based on this, for example, you can have the platform model where you're basically providing, for example, you are acting as a platform, and you need these new types of customers, the developers, as the ones building services on top of your, for example, existing applications and products. So they are basically adding value. And for me, this is a key change in terms of infrastructure and in terms of what is happening today. So things have been changing a lot. And I think that the whole flow of things and the whole added value chain is moving from, as I said before, a monolithic kind of structure to one that is more flexible, to one that is more agile. It's a bit more complex. And actually, technology has played a very critical role in this being transformed into something which is quite different from what it used to be.
Thank you, Panagiotis. I think that was wonderfully articulated. In fact, it was music to my ears, because when you talk about, converting all this into the ecosystem of APIs, developers, you basically democratize the whole technology build. You are able to plug and play typically like a Lego block kind of model, and that is where the infrastructure can not only be created, it can be also utilized and effectively and efficiently sort of become the backbone of the whole ecosystem. So whether we are talking about wealth, or we are talking about insurance, or we talk about lending, or we talk about payments, I think many of these building blocks remain common, right? So obviously KYC remains common, underwriting remains common, fraud remains common, right? So these are the common building blocks of any financial service ecosystem. It doesn't matter whether it's one regulator or the other. I think the eye is always on these things, right? And on top of it, obviously, putting together industry-specific components like Meghna talked about, flow-based lending, different models being explored there, or Nithin talked about the wealth management, wellness space, or you talked about payments. I think those could be the industry-specific point of view. So just that's a summation of my first question, which I picked up from your inputs. So probably let's go a little bit deeper as we have time to give audience something more what we have been experiencing and how we are able to bring it to the table. So if I just summarize it, that we did talk about data. Data becomes an underlying layer, and data repositories, whether it's an account aggregator, whether it is a PCR, whether it is, I'm talking about Indian context, and I'm sure global context, every country has the similar models, whether it's a bureaus, whether it is survey data, whether it is the data generated by the users or generated by the ecosystem, etc. So data becomes one of the big infrastructure play, and using AI ML on top of data becomes all the more important, because then a lot of learnings can happen and predictions can happen, right? So that's one. Second is API. We talked about it. I think Panagiotis, you talked about a lot on that, and APIs are becoming like a wiring for the whole industry. So while wiring of plumbing or whatever you call it, and I think everybody is fairly conversant with this word, even in the business community. People know that if I have to align with the e-commerce player, a banking platform, I need an API call. I need API call for this. So I think that's becoming a platform. But now we are moving towards from proprietary APIs or the integrations done between the two entities to open APIs frameworks, and that's becoming very relevant. I think we talked about a little bit on that. Third is, we didn't talk about it, but I think I'll just put it on the table for the discussion, that adoption of cloud also has been a phenomenal journey. I think most of the technology we talk about in fintech is, I think most of the fintechs are born in cloud, or they are hybrid cloud kind of scenarios. So while I would not say it's an industry infrastructure, but I would definitely say it's an infrastructure which drives the fintechs, right? Because if the cloud adoption was not so much as it is today, naturally the fintechs, when you talk about monolithic versus microservices, etc., it would have been very difficult to really build the applications. Everybody building data centers or using or keeping the walls in their own organizations and trying to collaborate, right? So cloud, I'm just using it as a word. I mean, it's not that it's more of a back-end infrastructure. It doesn't come in the front most of the time. And then fourth is, we didn't talk about it, but I thought I'll put that also in the ring to basically discuss, is blockchain. Now, again, there's too much of hype, less has happened, but because we have this opportunity to talk to all three of you who are experts in your field, are there possibilities of blockchain infrastructure also being used somewhere in some use cases? Because I think we have seen the lack of common industry players which can create that infrastructure is a bigger problem than actually the use case itself, right? Because within the four walls of organization, you can always do whatever you want in blockchain, but you may not be able to do it with four other players, because then there is a lot of governance required, a lot of collaboration required. So let me pick up these four. I mean, along the way, if we pick up something more, we will definitely talk about it. So Meghna, any of these four areas, would you like to talk about a little bit more deeper into it, that how industry is going to emerge and what fintechs are going to play the role? Do you see fintechs coming in enterprise tech and deep tech, which are basically going to play a significant role in making this work together with players like NPCIs and the Reserve Bank's sandbox environment and things like that? And how do you see it all going? I mean, just maybe a few points from you on this, and then we move to Panagiotis and Nithin also on that. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think that, when we started a few years ago, using technologies like AI, ML was very nascent. right? But today, as we are in 2021, especially post the lockdown, going digital and especially using, artificial intelligence and machine learning as a strategy has become the top priority of almost all financial institutions and fintechs and financial services organizations in India today. So we've seen, especially in the past 12 months, the kind of RFPs that have come out and the kind of buy decisions that are happening. We can clearly see that there's a push towards going, lending completely digitally and banking completely digitally, right? So I think today there's no need for you to actually go down to a bank, because everything can actually be done already digitally. And we're not talking about all the new age banks, but even if you take the private, local private banks, they've adopted enough technology where you actually don't need to go to your branch anymore. You actually go there for human interaction to talk to your manager maybe, but all of the banking services are actually, you could all do it online, right? So we're already there. So what I see in terms of trends going forward, right? I think that banks are going to have deeper collaborations with fintechs to develop what we call neobank capabilities, and that's where the deep tech is going to come in. What we're essentially seeing now, a lot of trends, especially with kind of signups that CrediWatch has had in the last 12 months, is banks are increasingly focusing on building, models, newer models for the newer customer segments that they're going after, using, a lot of big data, using, a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we've seen that as an increasing trend across all the customers we work with, where banks come to us and not only do they adopt our own AI-based, ML-based scorecards and predictive analytics, we also partner with them, collaborate with them to, work on some of their own data sets, and help them also come up with some models. So we see that, and that kind of, penetrations happening across not just, the new age fintech lenders, but even PSUs and large private banks are doing that as well, right? That's one trend that I see going forward. And second is, I see that all of the banks and NBFCs are gearing up to build digital infrastructure to do flow-based lending. So earlier, it would take 3 to 4 weeks for you to get a loan, sometimes even 2 months. Right now, we're looking at, giving a business loan in a matter of 30 minutes, right? Especially, and if you look at products which are specific just around GST data and all of that, you can do that in a matter of 5 minutes. So that means that the time it takes to actually give a business loan it's dramatically reduced because of the different, in technology initiatives that lenders have taken across the country. You have the, government's own initiative of loan in 59 minutes, and I think version 2.0 is coming out right now. But many other banks have come up with their similar products and platforms of their own. Another big trend that I see is in the supply chain. And I see that you talked about blockchain, right? I think the best use case for blockchain to actually, to kind of grow and scale in India, I think would be a supply chain use case, especially when because in creating digital invoices and creating the whole process where you're reducing a lot of friction and fraud, right? It would be very difficult to kind of counter a supply chain transaction that happens end to end on a blockchain because, it's kind of validated at every point. So we see that there's a lot of work that's happening. There are a lot of new fintechs that are coming about that are focusing on building supply chain, technologies and workflows using blockchain. And I see a big push there because almost every big bank today is actually getting at not only providing services to its own large customers, but also to the end suppliers of those customers and to the entire value chain. So from that perspective, I see that as a big emerging trend other than flow-based lending, is you're going to see a lot of significant developments in supply chain.
That's interesting. I think you very well covered, and the growth of any country's GDP is also dependent on the access to credit and, and I think GSTN is a great platform set up. It had its own hiccups, but I guess a lot of things have stabilized. And with data privacy laws being put in, an account aggregator coming in and access to the GST and data coming in, I think, as you rightly said, roadmap looks pretty interesting. And supply chain finance also is a very interesting topic. I mean, just to add here, a 2 cents from my side, you see the agri reforms have also been around, and agri-tech has been also growing significantly. And I see a lot of collaboration of agri-tech with fintechs because at the end of the day, the whole agri supply chain depends on the financial backing. So whether it's a full loan to farmers or it's a warehousing receipts against which the loans are given, etc. So whether the corporates who are playing in this or farmers who are there, I think quite a bit of that, what you said is also will be able to sort of add here, right? So interesting point of view. So Panagiotis, from your point of view, you talked about open APIs or the API infrastructure in a significant way, and I know some of the players globally. I mean, if I just throw some random names here, I see Plaid playing a role in US significantly, moving to UK and Canada. I see TrueLayer in UK sometimes doing pretty well. Rapid API doing quite a bit of stuff. Do you see this is a real wave of open API infrastructure platforms coming in? So it's not about just Meghna building the APIs for the credit underwriting, or Nithin building the APIs for the wellness, or you building the APIs for payments. Is it also the time to look at common API infrastructure players, and they become more like an aggregator of APIs, and they look at how do we disintermediate the whole process of building the digital apps or digital platforms? Because as a technocrat and as a consultant in the industry, I do see that launching a new product actually takes away almost like 50% of the time in the integrations, right? And while the business may be ready with the idea, but it takes good amount of time in spite of being all the technology available to be able to launch it in the market. And many of the products are shelved actually because the time to market is only, you have 2 weeks or 4 weeks, you have a festive season, you have a particular season for buying insurance, particular season for buying e-commerce stuff, or particular season for something else. So because of technological limitations and open APIs infrastructure not enough available, probably a lot of digital is not coming into the forefront. So because you play the global role, and you might be seeing this more often than us who are mostly sitting in India or Middle East, Africa, ASEAN market. What's your point of view on this, and do you see that's becoming a real story going forward?
By the way, I think it's worth mentioning that the APIs are not a new technology. I mean, they used to exist 20, 30 years ago. The fact that we are now they are now taking up and that we are now using them in financial services doesn't mean that they didn't used to exist before. So that's I think that's good to remember. Now, on the other hand, I mean, you mentioned a few names, very valid points. You mentioned Plaid, you mentioned some other things. I think here we see different models based on different geographies. For example, I mean, you have the European experience, you have, for example, the PSD2, you have the open kind of, let's say, banking regulation. I mean, open banking, I mean, PSD2 is not, it's just a regulation, and it's kind of enabling based on the infrastructure, based on the APIs, it's kind of facilitating the flow of data. So what used to be closed before, now it's open, and everybody has to share data with other institutions, and this is changing. So the fact that you cannot deny others, third parties or applications using your data and building value on top of this is what is making the big difference. Now you have, for example, a different approach, a more liberal approach in the US, where things are not regulated, and you mentioned Plaid. And actually, Plaid, the reason of the success of this kind of models is because you don't have regulators coming in and saying that this is how the game is going to be played. So actually, you wanted somebody who has been building in the background for many years all these connections through APIs, so that all of these applications, the modern applications that we see, can work. And actually, they can. What they do is that they are actually providing access to the data, so that the end consumer can kind of, let's say, have his data working, or her data working. So I think this is, for me, one key piece to differentiate. The second thing is, as you said, I see that the open APIs and the APIization is going to be a trend that is going to be continuing in the future. And one big thing that I see evolving, and I think there is a lot of potential on this one, is the fact that, I mean, we talked about this, we mentioned this before in the discussion. So the embedded finance discussion, so the fact that you can have any organization being able to embed financial services into their model in a relatively easy way, for me, is revolutionizing the industry. And I think we have seen some of the models in the past that have been having a lot of success because of embedded finance. And I think we don't realize that some of the simplest models of successful business stories that we have seen in the past, or that we are now seeing taking up, are actually embedded finance. I mean, if you, for example, take a taxi, and you are, I don't know, take a cab, you're using Uber. And at the end of the day, what do you do? You do two things. The first one is that you are booking this online, so you have an app. And the second thing is that you are paying for this in the background. This is embedded finance. So imagine if you're using an Uber, and at the end of the ride, the cab driver is telling you, okay, now you have to give me cash. What this would do to the customer experience. So the fact that this is embedded in one seamless flow, let's say, this is embedded finance. Or the fact, for example, we are now discussing, and there is a lot of hype around the buy now, pay later industry. Why is this successful? Because of the fact that this is integrated, this is embedded in the checkout process. So the customer does not really understand how things are working, that there are different services that are allowing him to facilitate the checkout. So for me, this is the name of the game. And I think we can make a parallel here that in the same way that Amazon and Amazon Cloud, for example, let's say the cloud was facilitating or democratizing, as you said before, access and use of the data. I think the same thing is now or might be happening in terms of democratizing access to financial services and having every company who would like, let's say, to embed or to offer these financial services, being in a position to get financial services as building blocks, as Lego blocks, as we said before, through APIs, and embed them into a model that makes sense for them. And actually, this is going to be, or this is now the case. It's very easy to do. Now, there are different, correct. And I think just to finish this off, I think there are different opportunities on both sides of the equation here. You have opportunities on the fintech space for companies who want to provide, let's say, their added value applications. And I think you also have opportunities on the traditional banking or financial services space, because now you have players who have the ability to look at different new business models. The fact that I can, for example, read my license as a traditional banking institution, or that I can access new customers on the B2B side, opens new opportunities which were, let's say, unthought of some years ago, I would say.
Panagiotis, we are facing some problem. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. No, I think that was wonderfully articulated. And I think embedded finance, I think practically finance is in everything nowadays. I think there is no transaction we do where finance is not involved. And I think a lot of innovation happening on that. And I think that's the right way, because it's a consumption-based story. So even lending is happening for the purpose. It's not happening for the just give it out cash and people can spend as they want. I think it's all happening that whatever you need, you take it from me, but I know that what you have taken from me and what is your consumption around that. And then I see that whether you can pay to me on time in sachets, and the whole, the cycle of the financial, is revolving around that, right? Interesting. So Nithin, slightly different question. You have been working with SEBI quite a bit, the regulator in India for wealth management. Now, do you see what is the thought process of the regulators on having fintechs creating the infrastructure, and especially if you see we are seeing the sandboxes, we are seeing a lot of innovation happening, etc. But is it converting into a real scenarios? Are the regulators taking it very seriously, and they are also providing the platform to be able to get right kind of fintechs who have the wherewithal to sustain in long run and who can become part of the stability of the whole financial ecosystem? So where do you see it going, and any thoughts on maybe correlating it with the open APIs or any other platforms we talked about? Happy to hear your answer. And probably because paucity of time, after I'll just have a rapid fire round. I'll have 2 questions from you each in a minute or 2 to just be on time. But yes, Nithin, your answer first, and then I'll go in the rapid fire round. Yeah, please. Thank you.
So I'm not representing SEBI here. I'm representing Yantra. So these are my personal views from that perspective. Now, for me, regulators are an important cog of the whole ecosystem. The ecosystem has 3 different players: the regulator, the consumer and the financial institutions, right? So to really be able to address the second part of your question, where are we building sustainable business models? Are we building sustainable fintechs? Is there a maturity cycle that actually can be built out over a period of time? I think that has obviously regulator has played a role in that, but that actually has to come from the whole customer institutional engagement perspective. What the regulator typically looks for, and this is globally, not just India, is to ensure that the consumer is protected. At the end of the day, what they would like various financial services companies is to build services and solutions for consumer that deliver value to the consumer, right? And then and that's where all these discussions are happening. Why are we talking about APIs being able to rapidly create apps, new business models? We are doing that because if you look at the penetration levels, right, across the industry, across the world, across categories, right? And it's not an India problem, right? You'll find insurance being less than 5%. Even in developed markets like US, the insurance penetration levels are 11% or 12%, right? So you have vast majority of the world, right? Whether it's individuals or SMEs or small businesses, which are kind of disenfranchised from this whole ecosystem, right? And the existing traditional ecosystem has really not worked for them, right? So we are all really, everyone here is trying to, along with the traditional banks, is trying to really see how we can create this new generation ecosystems where we can push that envelope, increase the number of people who have access, and access is such a broad word. What the regulator actually has tried to do, and always, and I've seen it in close quarters, is to really enable it, whether, as you said, creating those sandboxes, right? I think both IRDA and SEBI have created sandboxes now. And and this is very similar, even other countries. If you look at FCA in the UK, they have a sandbox. There is a whole application process for sandboxes for new businesses to really go in and develop. But the thing is, just the regulator with the sandbox doesn't necessarily create an ecosystem. The ecosystem has to come through with the players coming in and delivering that value. And to me, that's a slow process. We are still in the early stages of financial services innovation. While we've come a long way, last 5 years, the amount of stuff that has happened is great. Embedded finance, how we make payments is great, but that's largely payments, right? If you really look beyond that and compare, let's compare ourselves with airlines 10 years ago, right? Airline industry has transformed in 10 years. The whole customer experience and booking, it's no longer the same. The financial industry has changed, maybe by 5%, maybe by 10%. So I think we have a long way to go, and that's why it's so exciting. Fintech is exciting because, as you said, it's finance is in every piece of thing that we do, right? But it's not gone to the level at which we can say that it's a truly transformed industry, the way airline is an example, right? As has happened. I don't think we are there yet, but we will get there.
Sure.
And regulator has a very important role there.
Sure. Thank you. So just left with 4 minutes. So I'll go for a rapid fire round. And the rapid fire round is basically because all of you are, fairly seasoned, entrepreneurs come leaders in the fintech space. I think the message to the next generation of fintech, because we are talking about innovation being created by fintech in the infrastructure space, financial infrastructure space. So what would you advise? 2 suggestions from each one of you, that when you see in the future, if a startup has to come up, or some people, whether experienced or young, they have to set up a fintech in the financial infrastructure space, what are the 2 ideas, or what are the 2 areas you think that is still enough work has not happened and people can come and forward and do it? So 2 ideas each from you would really help us close the session with something for the audience as well, and the people who have been thinking, or maybe they are the ones who will incubate them. We have investors, we have incubators, we have budding fintechs all on the as a part of the audience. So 2 each of you. So Meghna, let me start with you. What are your 2 ideas to create fintech in the financial infrastructure space?
I think one would be trade credit, insurance. So, there's only, I think, one sandbox between RXIL and Tata, where they're creating trade credit insurance. And that's actually, trade credit is going to be very instrumental, especially for small businesses to be able to help, mitigate losses, and not enough work is done there, right? And there it again requires the same kind of credit decisioning, that kind of similar technology to be able to even issue trade credit insurance, right? So that I think I see a lot of things that need to happen. Second, I think is building solutions for embedded finance and flow-based lending. I think a lot needs to happen there. And while we're in the very initial stages of creating some products, I think in the next session you have Ugrow Capital. They've just come up with the first app that integrates with I think the GEM marketplace of the government, and they're able to give finance at the point of acceptance of an order. So typically you would raise an invoice and you get invoice credit, but here you're getting credit the minute you get an order or win an RFP, and that's a fundamental shift. So trying to accelerate to the journey of getting finance as close as trade to possible. Like instantly when trade happens, we're able to get instant finance. I think that's where I can see a lot of solutions coming up.
Interesting. Thanks, Meghna. Panagiotis, your two suggested areas for fintech to come up or scale up.
Yeah, I mean, one I would say is I see a lot of opportunity. In the past, we have seen many applications, many innovations happening on the retail space. I think that the SME space, or let's say the B2B space, has still many opportunities, only because of the fact that you have SMEs that are kind of neglected, or let's say the customer experience is not at the same level as on the retail space. So it's still far away. And we see many fintechs having, let's say, using services that are disintegrated, I would say. So take, for example, the data, take the lending. So for me, this is an opportunity. And the second one would be, it was mentioned before, I think the whole embedded finance, the whole banking as a service, the whole payments as a service, whatever you call it, because you have many variations. This space, I think, is going to be evolving. And as I said before, it's going to be creating opportunities on both sides of the equation, not only on the end consumer side, but also on the B2B side. So I see a lot of models, and I think we can still see today different models, but I think these models are going to be evolving as we go along.
Excellent. And Nithin, your two suggestions.
Yeah, I think one is it's an open thought, which is, I think the space where we identify retail customers or customer needs. I think need analysis, suitability, these are some of the very important areas where there's a lot of work that has to be done. We are still in the phase where we are digitizing distribution. We are still not at the phase where we do need suitability analysis for the customer. So that's one area where a lot of work will happen. Second, to me, one of the biggest revolutions that will really shift everything in this world is open banking, where you will see customer data, customer information, the customer becoming the owner of data, which is going to be very interesting because banks are not used to sharing data.
Yeah.
Right. So and so the regulators are pushing for it. The customers want it. So there's going to be a lot of innovation in that space, and it fundamentally changes the industry. Right. While we can talk individual products, but these are core infrastructural thought processes that will shift the industry the way.
Excellent. So I think we are just on time, maybe 1 minute up. And thank you so much, Meghna, Panagiotis, and Nithin. Wonderfully talking to you, and excellent point of views. I might say we could not pack anything more in 40 minutes than that. And thank you, Anurag and team, and Devika, Talis, everybody for inviting us. And handing over back to you, Bhavna. We are done with our panel. I think you please let us know, if you are good to go, or if any questions from any audience or anybody else. Otherwise, we have done most of it, what we could do in the given time. Yeah. Thank you.